This is Scott Becker with the Becker Business and the Becker Private Equity Podcast. This next podcast, is a session on building great businesses. This comes out of a webinar that was sponsored by Panther Capital, Com Advisors, and GoFig. And the discussion here is a discussion with Molly Gamble interviewing me on the new book that we have coming out in June, Building Great Businesses, Create Momentum, Overcome Setbacks, and Scale with Confidence. Thank you for listening. We hope you enjoy this. Molly, let me turn it to you. Molly Gamble's you've been one of my partners at Becker's Healthcare for a very long time. Is a fantastic leader, and she's the co-author of the book with me. Molly, I know I've set up a bunch of questions for us to go through. Let me ask you to start interviewing me, and hopefully won't put people to sleep too much.
Absolutely, Scott. Thank you so much. So building great businesses, create momentum, overcome setbacks, and scale with confidence out in June. Scott, it was a privilege to write this with you. You unpack a lot in this book. We're going to go through some of the big takeaways for people who are with us. The first is the stages of being a founder. You talk about founders going through these three distinct stages of evolution. Can you walk us through those three stages and which, if any, might be the most tricky in your experience?
Sure. No, we will. Yeah, absolutely. So the three stages of business, and the middle stage, I think, is the trickiest. The first stage of a business is you're often the chief cook, bottle washer. You're sort of doing everything. You're both bringing in business, you're executing on business, you're trying to make sure business gets done. So that would be stage one, where you're sort of doing everything. At some point, you decide, are you staying in that category? You're trying to grow further. The next stage in building a business is the first part of building a team around you. And when I look at the second stage of growing a business, that team doesn't necessarily do everything better than you do, but they do help leverage the founder, the CEO, so that the CEO, the founder, has more time to spend on what they're best at, or on taking care of customers or growing the business or whatever it is. So it's sort of a 2x difference. You could leverage yourself, but you haven't really built the next level business. It's almost like using AI versus agentic AI, where it could take things further without you being the limiting step. The third stage in building a business is when you've hired leaders around you and a team around you, and all of those leaders can do the job better than you could do that job yourself. So if early stages of Becker's Healthcare, which grew into a really nice, successful media company, I would do a ton of the writing, a ton of running the editorial team. At some point, we had to hire an editor-in-chief that could do that and run an editorial team. I think we've got 30 or 35 full-time writers today that could do it in a way that I could never do it, that could do it in a better way. So no longer am I the limiting step on the editorial team. Similar, at some point, we brought in a CEO. Partner of mine has been with us for 20 plus years, and I could never do her job as well as she does it. And now things become self-operating. It's not reliant on the founder to push every ball forward. There's a lot of other people pushing balls forward and really growing the business. Because you've now got people in all the key seats that are better at it than you are or were or could be. And I think that's the third stage of a business, is when it's no longer, the unfortunate reality for great founders is, or good founders is, you're a great founder when the business no longer needs you in the same way. That's when that's that third stage of an evolution of a business, is when you've hired enough people around you that they move the business forward without you being the limiting step. And that's sort of when businesses can grow 10x versus 2x versus 1x. Molly, let me turn it back to you.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's a big paradox, and it sounds like that third stage will be determined by how well you do the second. Similarly, Scott, you've outlined in the book these 5 stages in a company's development. Let's walk through those, what they are, and then also where you see founders typically get stuck or tripped up most often.
Sure. We view business development as a big funnel. You start with ideas, and we talk about this, and I'll go through it very quickly, then I'll talk about the specifics. Idea, product, revenue, profit, scale. And in venture-funded business, the fourth and fifth, profit and scale, might be reversed, and we could talk about that as well. But we talk about the 5 stages of development of a company. Everybody has an idea. Having an idea is meaningless. It's why the information overload of the AI, everything else, that in itself is nothing until you could do something with it. The next concept is you've actually developed a product or service that you're selling, whether it's, you know, Joe Calvinico selling valuations or taking your valuations for people, whatever it is, your product or service that you're actually now doing something, that you've actually got a product, you've gone from idea to an actual product or service that you're selling. The third thing is that you've got something that people actually pay for. And I heard a great comment earlier. It might have been from Craig about people having advanced hobbies versus real businesses, but you've actually got a product that people want. It's not just that people will pay for, that you've got revenues. You know, I always hasten the person who's talked to all their friends about their great business idea that they better actually talk to somebody who's actually going to buy their product, not just give them a pat on the back for a great idea. But the first three stages: idea, huge amount of people, to product or service, a much smaller amount of people, to revenue. That's the next stage. Then you get to the fourth stage, which is, can you have revenues and actually make money from it? That's where you start to get to profit. And finally, do you have something that's repeatable, that you could scale, that's wanted at some level of mass that you could scale? And the only thing I'll say again on 4 versus 5, profit versus scale, a lot of venture capital funded companies are built to scale first, figure out how big they can get, at what point their growth rate slows, and then work towards getting headcount to where they're profitable. And that's not right or wrong. It's a different way of doing business. But typically we think of 5 stages: idea to product or service, to revenues, to profits, to scale. Molly, let me turn it back to you.
A lot of companies, you see them hit this, they'll hit a revenue milestone, but they never quite break through to real profitability and scale. Scott, those final stages you outlined there, in your experience, what do you see as the biggest difference between the companies that make that leap and then the ones that kind of stall out?
Yeah, no, I think a lot of it is discipline and finding product market fit that people really pay for, and they'll pay enough for that it makes sense to run a business. I mean, in a services business, let me start with the first thing. One of the things I see often in startups that start to develop revenue is they keep on doing what we call moving the goalpost. So before they get to regular, consistent profit, they keep on adding to their expense line, and we call it moving the goalpost. And we find that to be a debacle. And, you know, some people could do it because they can afford to do it, but we often find that to be a debacle. So one problem is moving the goalpost. Second problem is we often see people, we talk about niches all the time. Are you in a niche that you could win in, and is it worth winning in? And you have people that are hitting this fine line of, they want to sell to enough customers, but they also have to sell at a high enough price in the niche that they're in to be able to pay and support the team they're trying to build. And so we see that as well, where people get sort of uncomfortable charging the right price, and they've got to charge the right price if they want to keep the right talent and build the right team and do the right thing. You know, the third thing is there could be false positives in finding a market that you're looking at. Any market you get into, you're going to have some wins, and some entrepreneurs get fooled by some of the early easy wins where there's not really depth in that market to win at any size or scale that will allow you to build the type of company that you really want to build. So I'd start with those 3 sort of errors or challenges where, you know, people are constantly moving the goalpost. They've got sort of false positives, some easy wins but not big enough wins. Or third, the pricing to get sales, but that pricing doesn't work for actually building a business and building a team. And we found that different companies have been involved in. At some point, you've got to have enough price discipline to be able to build the type of company you want to build, take enough margin that you can keep on growing, and that you could serve clients how you want to serve them. Because if you don't have the right pricing, you end up hiring sub-tier people, having sub-tier resources, and you can't serve clients in the way that you want to serve them either, or develop products as you want to build them too. So those are at least a few of the reasons where we see companies that don't get to that next level. And the companies that do get to the next level have clarity about product fit, something customers really want. They've got clarity of who they're trying to serve. Like the best customers have great clarity. This is our ideal customer. Here's who we're going after. And then to go back to something Chris Lacey said, they're building the right team. I'm a huge believer that in business, you can't do anything without building the right team. It just doesn't. There's all this talk of solopreneurs. There's all this talk about AI-enabled businesses. I just don't. Yes, very important, all those things, but I do think you need a great team to do anything significant.
Mm-hmm. We're gonna jump back to product market fit in just a second, but let's get into the zones of centricity. You talk about in the book team centric, being customer centric, being niche centric first and foremost. Niche centric. Can we start there, Scott, and then hear your thoughts on customer centricity and then team centric too?
In terms of niche centric, we've had the chance to study a billion different businesses. I've been on the boards of several businesses. I've been an investor in lots of businesses. Some of those have gone very poorly. Some of those have gone very well. Plenty of them have gone very poorly. So it's not, and one of the things we've learned is from some of the setbacks. But in niches, I always find that the best companies really know who their customer is, and they're really serving a niche, and they get better at serving that niche versus trying to serve everybody. When you're trying to serve everybody, it's almost like when you see a deck or a confidential information memorandum that talks about, our market is China, our market is this mega market, really broad market. It's almost meaningless to me. I mean, much more important is somebody that's really in a niche. They really specifically know who their ideal customer is. I always know that in businesses where we are struggling, we've not done a good enough job identifying who our true customer is, who we're trying to really focus on. And then the concepts of niche centric. We always think about a niche is, can you win at it? Is it worth winning? Customer centric. This is a lesson, age-old lesson. Are the least important thing for our most important customers is very important. And I could say that again. The least important thing for your most important customers is very important. So we've seen over the course of either in building a legal practice or in then building a media company or being involved in several different businesses, we've had people that have spent countless hours on the least important, smallest customer in the firm. And that might feel good because you're very connected to that customer, but far more important that you're really taking care of holistically your most important customers. And it doesn't matter what it is. If they're the customers to keep the bills on, you better be focused and have your best people taking your best customers, and ultimately not get distracted by customers that don't really pay the bills. And so that's a customer centric, being very focused on taking care of your customers, really know who your best customers are, who the customers are that, you tear out your customers, TIER, not TEAR, to make sure that you really understand, okay, these 20 customers are what really keeps the lights on. These 20 customers are important. These 10 customers we should get rid of because they're spending this amount of money per year with us, and I can't resource them well enough. I can't take care of them well enough as they need to be taken care of. So we really view it as really understanding your customer base and really taking care of your core customers. The third concept we talk about is team-centric. At the end of the day, the best business people that I know really know where the revenues and profits come from. They really know who their best people are. They really know who their best customers are. And to me, again, in businesses that I've seen be really successful, they've built great teams with depth. In others, I've seen supernova founders, incredibly talented founders that have not built out great teams. And at some point, those businesses often flame out. So there's only so far you can go, without building a great team and having people that are sort of like this agentic AI type thing people talk about. They could take the business further than you could by plugging in your own inputs, but that really growing great teams and great people and supporting the heck out of great people.
Least important thing for your most important customer is very important. It's such a succinct and great rule. Going back to product market fit, everyone wants it. Everyone sometimes thinks they have it. And there probably are a lot of false positives or signs for people who are eagerly looking for it. What are the telltale signs of product market fit? When do you know something's really clicked versus just you're really hopeful that it has?
Yeah, I think what happens is when you start to get repetitive business in an area, you start to understand that people have an interest in what your business is doing there. And it's sort of like, you could it's somewhat telling if you're killing yourself to pick up business and no business is coming in or very small businesses coming in. You have to sort of follow those signals. In contrast, if you start to see growth in an area, you ultimately double and triple down on that growth. When I first started a healthcare legal practice, I started in 3 different areas, healthcare niches. And it was, anybody that's of my generation remembers the scoreboards at sports stadiums where they used to have 3 different M&Ms running, like a red, green, and yellow M&M running. And one of them would be winning, one would be losing, one would be last. And in building a healthcare legal practice to begin with, working in 3 different areas, one of them was like the M&M that was winning. And so rather than trying to chase the other 2, we kept on doubling down in the area that was going great and built a great practice in that. And similarly, in building a media company, when we expanded from our original area to the 2 next areas, we thought area 1 would be our winner. Area 2 ended up being 90% of the company today, and it's become a really valuable company. But the concept was we were, we kept on watching what people wanted and where the business was. And then we kept on allocating resources to those areas versus fighting that. So you sort of get told by the market, this is growing like crazy. One of our meetings, which is one of our original meetings, is 32 years now, is in its 32nd year. And it's basically been pretty static for a long time. A couple of our other meetings that were started 5, 10, 15 years ago have, not just quadrupled that meeting, but are 10 times the size of that meeting. And it's listening to the audience, listening to your market. Where is their interest? Where is there not? And not being so stubborn to keep on focusing on the area that you loved as a legacy area, but not where your growth is. And then trying to develop sustainable businesses in the areas that you grow. But a lot of it's, really keenly following the signals and watching what's, where's the audience? Where is the growth? Where is the money coming from? Where are your best customers coming from, and growing with and around them. Versus stubbornly, when we first started growing into new areas at Becker's Healthcare, again, I thought one area was going to be our extra base hit because it's so closely aligned with our original area, and it turned out another area ended up being 90% of everything, and we just had to be smart enough and not stubborn enough to really keep on doubling down and tripling down in that area that really ended up paying the bills and growing. And it's just constantly watching and knowing your business. I think it goes back to something said earlier, it's the combination of AI and information and everything, and really paying close enough attention to know your business and grow your business around the areas where the customers want it, not just where you want it.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Last couple minutes we have, Scott. This book, you talk a lot about the spark to be an entrepreneur, but also there's a great spirit of pushing through setbacks, pushing through challenges. For entrepreneurs and founders who are going to walk away from the conversation today, what's one lesson about keeping momentum and pushing through tough times that you think they should take with them?
Yeah, no, I think it's a great it's a great question, and I think it's really challenging. It takes a lot of commitment to build a business because you have to decide that you really want to build it. You got to really follow the patterns in it. You have to put money into building teams. You got to take care of your teams. But I do think we used to always use the phrase that you have to dig 10 ditches before they dig themselves. Meaning you have to put enough momentum getting going and really getting something going until it starts to create momentum on itself, to where, people start to come to you for stuff, where you're starting to recognize as the company that takes care of this or does that or whatever you're doing. It takes a while. And I think we always think of things as conjunctive. And conjunctive, what I mean by this is, if you got one great person, you never want to lose that person to replace it with another person. It reminded me of the Cubs a couple of years ago, getting rid of Cody Bellinger to replace him with Kyle Tucker. Well, that doesn't really take you any further. You need 2 great people. And the same thing with great customers. You don't want to be overly reliant on one great customer, but you want to be conjunctive, which is really to try and grow in addition to that customer, so you've got lots of great customers, and we think of everything as it takes a lot of determination to really grow something, and then you've got to get to that next stage where you're people and customers where it's conjunctive. You've got ride or die people and you want more ride or die people. You've got too much customer concentration. You don't want to get rid of that customer. You want to add more great customers. And we view everything as very conjunctive. Now, let me stop there.
Yeah.
We've got a couple audience questions too. I just as soon take that, and take a couple of those questions. One question is, how do you control your AI agents, especially taking actions in regulated environments like healthcare, finance, and how do you just ensure that those decisions are defensible? I think this is like a lot of things going to be an evolving situation of not getting too far caught behind on AI, and at the same time being careful as you implement and try and grow it. I don't have a perfect answer on this. I don't think that anybody does, but I do think it's going to be a constant evolution of watching what your AI is spitting out and having some judgment too. Like if we look at, who are 20 great possible sponsors for this next thing we're doing, and AI pumps me out a list of 20, I could immediately tell one of our salespeople, well, that those might be great names, but there's not a fit with this small company in Alaska, or there's probably not a fit at this moment for McKinsey either. It's probably somewhere in between. And it takes a lot of that judgment. And I think in whatever you're doing, healthcare, finance, anything, sales, business development, there's going to be a lot of judgment attached to the AI as well as to get to the right spot. Another question is, some businesses plateau without reinventing themselves as the current structure doesn't work at scale. Oh, this is a reality. This is a really challenging issue. And, you're trying to build things where there's enough margin, where you can grow it at scale, where you can build the team that you need. I mean, we ended up expanding Becker's Healthcare 25 years ago, not because I wanted to, because we needed to build more areas to be able to maintain and grow the type of team that we wanted to build, because it was too vulnerable having a very small team, and we ended up growing a serious business because we had to, not because it wasn't for money. It was because we had no choice if we wanted to maintain the type of team and talent that we wanted to have. And the money did come, God bless. But I think you constantly have to be like really deep in areas, well experimenting in other areas. We've always thought about this in terms of business development and business growth and additional lines as 80% focusing on your core business, doing the business great, 20% on growing and expanding business and trying to grow into other areas. We've always sort of viewed it that way. I hope that's helpful for some people that have asked that question. We're extremely thankful to our three sponsors today and to all of our speakers. The three sponsors, GoFig, Com Advisors, and Panther Capital. Thank you so much. We're so thankful to all of our speakers, just fantastic. Thank you so much for listening to the Becker Business and the Becker Private Equity Podcast. We hope you enjoyed this.